as we can.
Okay, moving on then, I had a nod, I think, from Andy Smith, who wants to deal with the children's portfolio, children's and adults. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So Andy Smith, Strategic Director for People Services. So I'll set a bit of context to People Services and the budget, and then we can open it up for any questions. And I've got all the directors here from Adults, Children's and Public Health on hand. So Scrutiny will be aware that People Services is a significant and complex area for the Council. The Directorate includes specialist support for children in care and care leavers, special educational needs and disability services, and safeguarding of the most vulnerable children and adults. Adult social care offers support services to vulnerable adults, as well as information and advice about social care to the general public more broadly, and to people who fund their own support. We commission care and support for people with assessed needs and have a significant relationship with the NHS, including some integrated services. And we also fulfil and discharge the full suite of statutory requirements in relation to public health. There are very few discretionary services left now across People Services, the vast majority of services now being statutory. We've continued to see a significant number of reforms and new legislative requirements in recent years, many of which have not been sufficiently funded and have placed direct financial pressure on the Council and on councils and resulted in a rise in demand, for example, in terms of children in care and the wider placements market. There are pressures driving demand across adults and children's services, and this is compounded by the wider economic context and cost of living crisis affecting our communities. This all places greater pressure and risk on households, particularly on our vulnerable households and communities of hardship and poverty. And nationally, as the report outlined, we've seen an increase in demand for both adults and children's services. And in my view, I can't see that that's going to change in the future going forward. Just wanted to reflect on a couple of national surveys that have come out which set the context. The latest survey produced by ADAS, the Association of Directors of Adult Services, published in November 2023, showed that the number of people awaiting an assessment of their needs, care or direct payments to begin or for review of their care plan had increased by 8% since March 2023, which equates to about 500,000 of people who are not getting the support they need. And in addition, 83% of councils were projecting an overspend on their adult social care budgets for the end of this financial year, which equates to about 515 million, or an average of 3.5% of the social care net budget. Nationally, on the children's side, the number of children in care is now at its highest since records began in 1994, at over 82,000, and has been rising annually since 2009. Councils are supporting ever-increasing numbers of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and care leavers, with Home Office funding for these placements failing to fully cover costs. This is especially the case for former US care leavers, who now make up 26% of the care leavers population nationally, aged 19 to 21. The number of children needing support from children's social care more widely had begun to fall from a peak of 2018 when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, but numbers and rates of children in need and child protection plans are now rising again, and the complexity of needs of children post-COVID has also increased, as observed by Ofsted and the Association of Directors of Children's Services, and this is all placing additional pressure on councils and social workers, with more resources required to support children and families. It's worth remembering that despite the rise in demand and pressures across children's and adults in Derby, we've been successful in managing demand through, for example, our local area coordination approach, which is now part of our new locality approach, and our Staying Together team in children's services, keeping children out of care. We've also done some purposeful and impactful work to reduce the numbers of children safely and appropriately from exiting care, reducing pressures and costs in relation to home-to-school transport for children with special educational needs and disabilities, recruit and retain qualified social workers, and get our agency numbers of social workers in children's social care to 0. We also have strong strategic and operational relationships with the NHS, with good examples of integrated working. So what you'll see in the MTFP report around pressures is a picture of pressures reflecting the provision for increased package costs and demand for adult services, which reflects the impact of the national living wage and inflation on the cost of care packages. It reflects new funding to increase the budget for the workforce and hospital discharge programme, and ensures provision for an increase in the costs across children's social care in relation to placements for children who need to be in our care. So whilst our numbers of children in care are now at pre-pandemic levels in terms of numbers, the complexity is a challenge, coupled with the broken placements market, which is increasing the costs of placements. Provision for the increased costs of social worker salaries and children's services due to the impact of the pay award and the stability and low attrition of the workforce, which is a real strength but has a cost implication. And this relates to the extraordinarily positive position of having no agency social workers in children's social work fieldwork services. The savings outlined in the MTFP, so there are a range of proposed savings across children's and adult services, and directors are on hand to take any questions from exec scrutiny. We're not going to go through them line by line, Chair, but we're here to answer any questions. Proposals in relation to adult social care packages is also subject to a separate statutory consultation that is now well underway. Other savings include a review of some vacant posts, increased income from health for complex cases, and home-to-school transport efficiencies.
Thank you, Andy. A couple of quick questions from me. You mentioned that the costs of asylum seeker, and particularly young children, aren't being properly met by government, and there are obviously potentially housing effects, knock-on effects to the council. Is there work still ongoing to rectify that and to make sure that councils are properly funded to do their duties in relation to this sector of the public?
Thanks, Chair. There's an ongoing dialogue that the Association of Directors of Children's Services is having with the Home Office and the DfE, actually, and DLUC in terms of future spending reviews in relation to councils receiving the full cost of what it takes to look after unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. At the moment, we receive a proportion of the cost, and it's significantly lacking in terms of former UASC who are now care leavers. So there is an ongoing dialogue, but we haven't yet got a resolution. And the numbers clearly are still a significant increase for both Derby and across the country.
Do we have an idea of the overall cost for this, for the City Council?
Well, we've currently got 53 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children who are in our care, and we've got higher numbers of children who are in the care leaver service who were former unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and we only receive a proportion of the cost for those children. I haven't got the numbers exactly to hand. I don't know if Janice is able to provide any numbers associated with that, but certainly in terms of the full year cost, we don't receive that in its totality. And what happens in these situations, Chris, is that, Chair, is that we have to enter into a negotiation with the Home Office in relation to each of the UAS child that we're looking after, and we have to go through a process in order to determine the level of funding that we receive. So we are often in an arrears situation whereby we have an estimate of the cost. So we're expecting, for example, I think an additional 500,000 in year in terms of income for UASC, but we're still in a debate with the Home Office in relation to each individual case. So we've made some assumptions in our budgeting around the cost that we're going to receive, but we're still in a dialogue with the Home Office in relation to individual cases. So we're in arrears, we're in a dialogue. We usually get what we predict or forecast that we're going to get, and the numbers are certainly increasing, but we broadly only get around a third of the cost that we think we should get, broadly speaking, in terms of UASC.
Okay, Andy, thank you. There was a role through the East Midlands councils for the relevant cabinet members, Alison, John, in relation to this, to bring pressure on the Home Office to make these, to make up for these payments. Are you still involved with the Home Office and East Midlands councils through this?
I'm happy to be involved, Chair. I've not been so far. You know, it's an ongoing problem, obviously. And maybe it's going to increase, but I suppose on the positive side, when we have children unaccompanied asylum seekers in our care, they don't tend to stay very long. But yeah, if there's a funding lag, we need to close it.
Okay, so maybe East Midlands councils can be the conduit to that. They're regularly in discussion with the Home Office on this subject. So somebody needs to take it up. The other aspect that you mentioned, Andy, that I was interested in particularly, amongst the savings you touched on the fact that there are more savings in relation to transport. Can we have an update from whoever on where we're at with the transport situation and the savings that were predicted and are future predicted?
Thank you, Chair. Germel is a Director for Commissioning. So in terms of savings that were previously forecast, we are on track to achieve those. And the ones that have been outlined in this report are a follow-on to different contracts that are currently in place, and therefore further savings through that contract now that it is mobilised and operational for a 4-year period. And that's an additional 350,000 within that contract for this financial year. And then there are some additional figures for further more block/smarter contracts being set up in partnership with providers for particular lots of transport arrangements which allow efficiencies but also allow continuity for parents and providers to work with a set of families in relation to providing that transport, building on the current arrangements in place, Chair.
Any questions on those two subjects from board members? Yes, Councillor Kerr.
The council has an attitude that tends to be very much we will provide, but what we're providing for is the people of Derby. And I don't know what approaches have been made more recently to see if we could make more use, that people from the city of Derby would be more able to contribute to our services. Clearly, one area where we have done this, and have done this a lot, is in fostering, and I applaud everybody who is a fosterer or has been a foster carer, because that is a really valuable role to be taking up. But other areas of doing this, which I think have got less publicity, are things like shared lives and the opportunities for some of these young people who have been in our care to actually continue to be part of a household or to become part of a household at that stage. And I just wondered how much effort and how much resource is going to be planned to move into that sort of partnership way of working. I can't see it explicitly here, but it is something that potentially could be a way of saving.
Thank you. Would that fall to you, Gamal, or who would that come to?
I'll pick that one up, Councillor Kerr. So you're right, there's been a really positive narrative and a really positive way in which we've worked as a council with our wider partnership in relation to fostering recruitment. There's been a corporate approach and corporate response around recruitment of foster carers. We're just about to, from April, move into a larger D2N2 footprint in relation to fostering, which I think presents further opportunities for us. And that word of mouth through our foster carers with people that might be considering to pick up the phone and become foster carers cannot be underestimated. It's really powerful. I think there's definitely learning across the way in which we've tried to market and promote the role of the council in relation to fostering that we are considering and we need to do more of in relation to things like shared lives. I think we've got the partnership structures in place for us to think about how we engage with that kind of wider network of partners, other anchor institutions where you've got significant members of the workforce that might be interested in becoming foster carers or shared life carers or providing some level of volunteering. I mean, E4E, for example, in terms of going into schools and helping years 10 and 11 think about the world of work. I mean, that has something that's been picked up and has been very, very positive. So I think always looking at opportunities to really try and promote the role of the council in place in terms of the different services and the different things that we provide in a way that kind of promotes things in the right way, and definitely learning across different strands and how we roll some of these things out. We haven't got anything explicitly in here in terms of how that might equate to responding or dealing with a pressure or a budget saving, but I think in terms of a way of working and a narrative and a dialogue, I think that absolutely is the way in which we want to work, and I think there are some good examples of how and where we've done that.
Okay, so I'm going to give the Cabinet members involved a chance to make a comment or statement at this stage, and then I'll come to committee members. So, yes, Alison.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Alison Martin. I'm the Cabinet Member for Health and Adult Care. Currently not feeling that healthy, but so forgive me my voice a bit. But that's an excellent question, Lucy, and it's something we need to keep focused on, because we all care for people. Probably everybody in this chamber cares for someone. And to some degree, we're all carers, and we've all been cared for. So socially in society, it's a collective responsibility. Obviously, the council quite rightly has statutory duties to provide care, and the council will provide that statutory care for people, because that's what we morally and legally are obliged to do and want to do. But just to say, in the spirit of your question, it's not a concrete thing, but it's the beginning of a process where we're starting to talk to people more, carers, and asking them what help how the council can help them care better for those they have to care for. So how we can work together better in providing services, providing support, and ensuring that there's sort of networks of support in the community. And the first step in that will be this carers forum meeting we're having on the 25th of this month at the West End Community, not the West, at the West Indian Community Centre in the morning. So all carers are welcome to that. It's a small step, Councillor Kerr, I'd admit, but it's the beginning of a dialogue which we will progress, and hopefully we'll get some ideas from the people at the front line on this. Thank you.
Councillor Martin, although you're not very well, any further comments or statements in relation to the overall budget proposals from your point of view?
Not at the moment, thank you, Chair.
John, anything from you?
Just to say, Chair, thank you. You know, it is regrettable that we need to make more savings, but I suppose we all know why that is. The children's services team are doing remarkable things, to be honest. You know, we have fewer children in care, we have more foster carers. I think they're certainly thinking outside the box in as many ways as possible. We're avoiding costs. I think it was about 11 million we think we've avoided recently. There are no agency social workers. You know, that saves us a huge amount of money. And yet we're still, you know, we can't quite yet get to that balanced position on children's placements. It seems like it's impossible. We will get there one day, but we need a lot more children to come off the register. We need a lot more foster carers. The costs are incredible. The top 20 national private providers of care, I think last year made over £300 million of profit. You know, this is all taxpayers' money. It's all our local authorities' budgets. It's all vulnerable children. It is extremely disappointing. That's the understatement of the century. So that's the sort of landscape we're up against. But you know, we still need to make more savings. I'm very positive about some of the things. The transport, home to school transport is positive. We've made great strides this year. Hopefully there'll be more next year, keeping those budgets down. But yeah, any of the other savings, of course, is regrettable. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Wright, you indicated.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Cecile Wright, Harbour-Eaton Ward. I didn't get a sense from the presentation with respect to this area, the extent to which the pandemic is feeding through in terms of the budget challenges. And I'm particularly concerned about the savings that are having to be made. Clearly, we have no choice because there are major structural reasons for this. But I'm deeply, deeply concerned, particularly as a councillor in a ward where over 50% of our children and young people are in poverty.
Okay, any other questions from board members? Can I just ask one quick one, Andy, and Robin might be able to assist with this. Out of personal experience, you touched on hospital discharge and the work that's needed, that's still going on there, and I appreciate there's been quite a lot of work put into it, but from very recent experience, it seems that the pharmacy issues are still there, in that it does cause significant delays, and they appear to be insistent on only issuing the required medication from their pharmacy rather than writing a prescription that other people can take away with them quicker and go to their own pharmacy with. Any thoughts on that, Robin or Andy?
Thank you. It's Robin Jewis, Director of Public Health. I think that would be an interesting conversation. I know that previously UHTB particularly have been within conversations about this. There are some technical challenges around the type of prescription and where that can be filled, which relates to a GP being able to issue an FP10 prescription, which can be used in community pharmacy, and that not necessarily being available in secondary care. So there are some technical issues around that, but I'm aware that there are still continued ongoing conversations around pharmacy delivery.
Okay, I mean, for me, it doesn't necessarily need to touch the doctors, but just issue from the hospital prescription to the pharmacy to issue whatever it is they are prescribing. But anyway, something which, if you can take up, I think certainly my experience causes delays in discharge. Okay, Matthew.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Matthew Oakwood Ward. I've got one particular question on children's, and then most of my ones on adults relate to AI, so I don't know if you want to take those ones separately or now. On the proposal for the 4-year contract for home-to-school transport, what years is that contract between? Because all the savings appear to be in 1 year and no savings in any of the other 2 years. Just wanted to double-check how that works.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of, it's a 4-year contract, but most of the changes that are being made are around sort of year 1 and year 2. So they are front-loaded in discussion with the partner, and also in relation to the number of applications, types of journeys. So yes, they are front-loaded, but we do expect that to continue and then platter out on that sort of even footing in terms of what we expect the cost to be and the number of journeys to be transported. I don't know if that answers the question, Chair.
It sort of does and it sort of doesn't. So it's plateauing out then for 2025, 26 and 26, 27 at nothing at all. Almost seems sort of magical in a way that we plateaued it out at exactly nothing. There's no saving or no pressure at all in those other 2 years.
Thank you, Chair. So without going into detail, but I'm happy to have a conversation directly with the councillor in relation to the contract itself. In summary, we believe, in line with the tender documentation, in terms of what we think the number of journeys would be, what the cost of those journeys are likely to be, subject to inflation uplift, and that's where the savings have been factored in. So it will be fairly consistent over that 4-year period in terms of the number of journeys that have been purchased with the provider and the cost of those, and therefore it's been front-loaded, mainly because you're transitioning from one process to another. But I'm very happy to have a detailed kind of conversation in relation to how that contract will operate and how the finances work and the front loading of those. Chair, very happy to do that.
Councillor Schenker.
Thank you, Chair. If it just helps to explain, and I'm sure Gurmail and Alison will correct me if I'm wrong, but the whole idea to have the savings front-loaded in years 1 and 2 of this is so the overall saving is a lot more. Just because the saving appears in year 1 and 2, it doesn't mean it's not being saved in 3 and 4. It's baked in year 1. It comes out of the budget, so that saving then rolls on for 3 years, 4 years. So it's not, we're not saving in years 3 and 4. The saving's taken now, and it comes out of the budget for forever. So it's still making a saving in years 3 and 4.
Is that right, Alison? So it's not a one-off saving?
No, it's not a one-off saving, it's out of the base budget, so we'd have to continue to deliver that.
Okay. Any other questions in relation to children's and adults? Councillor Kerr.
This is a public health question, and it relates to the services that we provide, particularly within, I think it's the Live Well scheme, to encourage people to to improve their own health, because at the end of the day, if people can be healthier, then it's better for them and it's better for our services as well. And I wondered whether we have given any thought to targeting some of this support to people who actually work for us and live in the city, because then we're both gaining from their own health and their ability to take less time off work, as well as them being a beneficiary as part of the population of Derby, and whether that has been something that's been looked at.
Andy or Robin or anybody?
Thank you. So from a Live Well perspective, the service is available to everybody who lives in the city or is registered with a city GP, and is certainly promoted to staff in that way. There's also work ongoing with our HR colleagues around well-being and health of the staff as well.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Martin.
I wonder, Chair, if I could just come back on your own question. So on relating to hospital discharge. I agree this is a really important area, and it's very much recognised in the integrated care system, and as you'll be aware, in ongoing initiatives within the council to further integrate the council's own and the NHS's hospital discharge provision and services, etc. So I'm aware that it's a priority also for the ICB. But I think it's quite frustrating because, you know, when I go out and about and I talk to people, and they often have, you know, unfortunate stories to tell. So from my point of view, I mean, and this needs to be addressed through the Integrated Care Partnership, as you'll be very well aware. And so I personally, we need to look at ways of getting, of harnessing more feedback on that process, I think, from people. So that's something, you know, I could take away or we could take away. But also I'm happy if yourself or anybody else wants to write to me to tell me, you know, what's actually going on when, and also like suggestions like you say, because often these are quite simple suggestions that could be really productive and really helpful, provided there are no barriers to implementing them. So I personally am always happy to hear from people with their experiences and their suggestions, and I will put these to senior leaders in the council and in the ICB through the ICP. Thank you.
I think you're right. I think personal experience is valuable as an experience to learn from, and people, if they hear those, should be able to enact them. And without going into keeping everybody for too long, the pharmacy was a problem. There's evidence of improvements in terms of the fact there's a discharge unit now, that it's staffed, but it seems to be staffed with low priority. There were shorter numbers in terms of staffing in there, but I can write to you about that. But it's an area where I know of people 2 days, 3 days in hospital waiting for pharmacy or waiting for discharge, and in terms of bed blocking, then there can't be anything that's more prominent, to be honest. I'll write to you. Okay, moving on then from children and adults. Who's next on the firing line? Who wants to go next? Yes, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Sam Dennis, Director of Communities. So the Place Directorate delivers a diverse range of services. Most of them are statutory, but all of them are extremely important to keep people safe and keep the city well maintained. Based on our last place survey, they're also highly valued by our residents. Our teams deliver high-risk, high-profile services, including 150,000 waste collections per week, and maintaining the city's 768 kilometres of carriageway drainage networks and managing the council's fleet service. We also provide award-winning parks and open spaces. Our teams are focused on regenerating the city and supporting some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. This is during the context of a cost of living crisis where we've seen increased service demands in all areas from public protection through to homelessness. It's never been more difficult to deliver these services, and we've already made significant savings over previous years, and we've driven efficiencies in all aspects of the Directorate. In effect, we're delivering as much as we can with the resources that we have. This leaves us in a position where we now need to make some difficult decisions in order to meet a balanced budget. We have existing savings in place of just over 1.2 million, and we have new savings proposed in the MTFP of just under 1.7 million. The tables in the report do set out the details of the savings proposed, and we are happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Sam, I'm sure there will be some questions on this side of things, but Councillor Dinser, did you want to make any statements or comments in relation to the savings in the budget so far?
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's fair to say that this is quite a wide-ranging directorate, and I'm responsible for a number of those areas, but they are shared with colleague cabinet members, Councillor Swan in particular. So I'll make statements around my area of responsibility. Waste collection is the most front-facing service that we provide. Nearly every household can make their experience known to us, and it's a challenging task with reduced budgets. As the director said, 1.2 million in a year and then 1.7 coming forward. It's not the largest budget holder, and these cuts in this area and in terms of parks, maintenance, ground maintenance of parks, will have a massive impact on the people of Derby. And we need to ensure that we cannot continue to fund savings and cuts in this area, because it's having impact on the majority of people, particularly in our neighbourhoods and communities. And that, unfortunately, is the legacy of many, many years of underfunding for councils, particularly, as we heard earlier, in terms of adult social care, children's services, which have large budgets, and there's greater gaps. And we often end up trying to close those gaps by looking at the community's street part budget, and that has happened, but it has happened to the detriment of the people of Derby in terms of the services they expect and want from Derby City Council. And we need to do whatever we can to reduce this trend of having to continue to fund services that are increasing in demand due to lack of funding being made available by national government over many, many years now. So this year we will have to make further cuts, but they do have an impact on what we can provide to the majority of our residents in terms of waste collection, our public services and parks, and the staff in those do a great job with reduced resources and increased demand. And I think we need to sort of do whatever we can to be as sensitive as possible in terms of the savings we are forced to make, not the ones we want to make.
Thank you. Other than the efficiencies, though, I'm not clear on exactly where these cuts are going to come. In fact, in terms of waste collection, you've increased the costs of waste collection for the council through your actions at Rainsway. What's your plan in future in terms of reducing costs on waste collection? I was asking Councillor Dinser actually, but you're deferring to Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of driving efficiencies in waste collection, we're currently undergoing a round review that's going to enable us to be as efficient as possible and drive out costs within waste containing any growth in the future. Alongside the round review, we're also looking at where we can be more efficient across all of Street Pride to contain the pressure from the waste changes, as per the report in December Cabinet.
Thank you. Other than the efficiencies, though, I'm not clear on where these I suspect board members might have questions around making efficiency savings, but go on, Councillor Lindsay.
So one of the things which was quite clear and has been confirmed in the decision making about opening up Rainsway Recycling Centre on Sundays for unbookable use was that as a result of savings being made and therefore lack of waste being collected or received at the recycling centre, something like £500,000 of savings have been made. But if you look at the cost of fly tipping and the resources required to deliver those, I think the director will be able to give me the correct number, but that's something like £300,000 worth of increased fly tipping collection and consequences of on our services have been the consequence. So the Rainsway bookable offence and the free bulky waste collection are both measures to encourage and enable the people of Derby to do the right thing and use the facilities to get rid of waste rather than putting it on our streets and making the environment of our neighbourhoods unpleasant. So the decision about efficiencies is about looking at a way of reducing the costs of fly tipping and other environmental negative consequences in terms of cost or recovery of those, but also the negative impact on our communities and our neighbourhoods. So that is what we're going to be doing. And then in terms of further efficiencies, the package is not a singular bit of work. It is a combination of those two things in terms of enabling people to use the right facilities and do the right thing, but also we are introducing a new pilot of enforcement, which according to use in other local authorities has had a positive impact in increasing enforcement and the income generation from that. You may know, Councillor Poulter, that for the last 2 to 3 years, your administration put up targets for income generation through enforcement and enforcement of environmental enforcement penalties. Every year, there was a failure in achieving those income generation targets. The package of opening the recycling centre on Sundays for unbookable visits and the 2 weeks of free bulky collection, in addition to the pilot to have a private company come in and to actually implement enforcement, and from previous history that we know of in other local authorities, we're looking to see that that will actually increase our income and hopefully achieve more than your administration was able to do over 3 years, probably in 1 year.
I'm glad you bring that subject up, because actually targets of increased income from enforcement and efficiencies, we quite quickly learned that they are often unachievable, and if that's the case, then that's why we're nervous, and I think you're going to get challenged about some of this waste thing shortly. But I'm going to carry on and do Councillor Swan first, and then I'll come to members' questions. Councillor Swan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, I was going to just confirm alongside Councillor Hardill that the fly tipping is a huge problem across our communities, and it's the one that we will probably all receive the most casework about. And now when we're talking about time and efficiencies, if we and our pilot is successful, then I think we can claim some success around the reduction in the budget unnecessarily for waste disposal, but also the compactor days, which are, I think, across our wards, everyone has welcomed.
Sorry to stop you, Councillor Swan, but just to comment on that. Yes, fly tipping is a problem across the city, but it's more of a problem in some wards, And it's okay running a pilot in Arboretum and Normanton where your members work, but there is a fly tipping problem across the city. So whatever is introduced needs to be universal. That's just a comment. Thank you. Anything else on street pride generally, Councillor Swan?
Not from me, no. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wright was first to indicate.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I hope that you will allow this question of mine to be answered. It's in relation to homelessness. As you know, there's a housing crisis in the city of Derby, as in many cities. There was mention of homelessness in the city. I understand that we are having to deal with this situation to the cost of £1.5 million. How are we going to ensure that we meet our statutory responsibility with respect to this issue? Thank you.
I'm happy to, Chair. So, Councillor Wright, you're right, homelessness is a real problem for us. And we are currently experiencing stays of up to a year for our residents in temporary accommodation before we can help them move on. So in terms of the longer term, there is a capital programme of building acquisitions, which was discussed last week in this chamber. And we're also working with colleagues to try and come up with some innovative solutions in terms of trying to help people come out of bed and breakfast and the like. More about that can be discussed in the future, but we're currently working up proposals.
Councillor Schenker.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing what the officer has just said, but also, you know, it's one of the big three pressure areas of the council now. Everyone knows about adult social care, everyone knows about placement of children in care, but the increase in homelessness, again, you know, sky high mortgage rates, the cost of living crisis, we're seeing more and more people presenting themselves to the council as being homeless. We've got a statutory duty to provide for those people. We're doing our best to provide for those people. The loss of properties from the right to buy is also a issue successive administrations have tried to address. We can't get people out of temporary accommodation quick enough just because those properties aren't there. We had a paper at Cabinet last week where we're acquiring new homes just outside the city boundary, but it's measures we're having to take. We continue to look at properties, whether it's through purchasing those or buying and rectifying properties ourselves or purchasing them from the open market. We'll continue to do that. But the increase of about £1.5 million allowance we've had to put in the budget is because we lose the housing benefit for anybody who's been in temporary accommodation for more than, I think it's 42 days is the exact figure. And it's a problem we've got, and it's a problem we need to address. It's government needs to provide help to local authorities, not just Derby, but local authorities across the country to either create more housing or change the rules so we don't lose housing benefit and then we're having to provide that subsidy. It's £1.5 million in the budget, which we can ill afford.
I accept the additional costs in terms of housing, but I think it's appropriate to mention that the council's received significant funding through central government to tackle the homelessness, the on-the-street issues. It funds a lot of our partnership working in this area and staffing for those that are trying to tackle the actual homelessness on the street. And I think we just authorised some more or just agreed to bid for accept more in recent cabinet meetings. So whilst the funding's coming for that, then if there's a problem in relation to knock-on effects on housing, then representations need to be made in respect to that. Yeah? Okay. Who was next? I think, yes, it was you, Councillor Kerr, I think.
Thank you. And this is another area of the council's work which really can make a difference if there is good public engagement. And it's not just on getting people to stop dropping litter, but in some areas people are picking up litter and they aren't dumping. And it is a matter of education, and I can't see, there doesn't seem to be an appetite here for putting money into educating our public so that they are helping achieve the sort of environment that we want them to live in. So I just wondered whether there was anything more on that. We do have, as I say, we have some wonderful people in the city who are involved in some areas. Parks are particularly good. Parks have Friends of Parks, they have the Derby Parks volunteers. So we can engage with people and enable them and support them into providing a volunteer service which benefits the whole of the city. And it's really whether or not we are doing sufficient engagement to enable that to happen in other areas where we're not doing it at the moment. Can we roll out that parks thinking to other areas and help reduce costs and improve services?
Councillor Lindsay, you wanted to come back on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair comment in terms of trying to work with the citizens of Derby to help reduce fly tipping, litter, and generally contribute towards a better environment. And Councillor Kerr, you're right. The Friends of Parks are a great example where there are people out there who want to do the right thing and will volunteer to do that. And it may not be in the budget documents here, but that effort and that work that the park staff have done to actually increase and enable Friends of Parks groups to be set up and to make such a contribution to the city is valued and is growing. For example, we now know that we have got Friends of Cemeteries. Nottingham Road has got a group of volunteers who are working to organise themselves to do something similar to our cemeteries as is being done in our parks. And certainly in terms of the campaigning and the education for people to adopt the right behaviour, to recycle and use the recycling facilities and the bins correctly. If you may recall or you may not, but we had a very successful campaign and promotion of that last year, which got recognition at a regional level in terms of sort of trying to highlight how the public can do their bit to do the right thing, to recycle things in the appropriate things so that our waste, general waste, and the contamination of our recycling processes are reduced. And generally speaking, the same message, and it will continue, and we can actually reinforce it more coming forward. So I really welcome that, to do the same thing about educating people of the negative impact, not only because of the enforcement hopefully will be greater and the financial penalty will be greater if they don't, but also to encourage people to do what many already are doing. Many people are following the correct procedures, the correct behaviour to keep our city clean and litter-free. And I think we want to champion, I will certainly do my job best with officers to champion people who are doing the right thing and keeping our city clean and not fly tipping, and support them so that more and more people come forward and behave that way. And in the past, we've had campaigns like be proud of our city, be proud of your neighbourhood, and be proud of your street. And that's the sort of campaigns I think we will continue to focus on, and I certainly will be putting my full force behind making sure that we make the people of Derby aware of what is the right thing to do and how they can do it for the betterment for all of us.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dinser. There are some excellent examples around the city already of what can be achieved. You are actually present at the opening of a very successful new play area in Spondon, sponsored and run and designed by our Friends of the Parks in Spondon. And actually there's been a Friends of the Spondon Cemetery group for 5 years, which I chair, and we've done some great things there as well. So there are things we can do, but I think it's a neighbourhood's agenda thing, and neighbourhood funding can support it, and local councillors can support this community buy-in to their own communities. So I think that's a good thing. Yes, Councillor Mulhall.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman, Councillor Mulhall, Councillor for Oakwood Ward. So I've got 2 questions. My first question, I think, is for yourself, Sam. Councillor Dinser, you might be able to come in as well on it. It's around efficiencies are notoriously hard to realise. And speaking from personal experience, I've always found that. So I'm keen to understand what processes or what processes are the council going to follow or implement to basically make sure that these efficiency savings become a reality and that the council can actually see the benefits realisation of them. And my second question is around where's the incinerator in all this? Because as far as I can tell, it's not mentioned in the document. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the efficiencies, we're using some software mapping, working with a company that provides our in-cab technology currently. So this software mapping will enable us to use digital technology to make the rounds efficient. In terms of implementation of any efficiency reviews, they will be reported to the Efficiency and Innovation Board as part of the governance process in the council. Thank you.
And the incinerator?
So this report, Chair, is around budget savings proposals for the next 3 years, and there are no proposed budget changes around the Sinfin Energy from Waste plant.
But clearly there are costs. Are there no efficiencies to be had from those costs?
You may be aware from the previous decision that we're currently in the process of soft market testing. So once we've completed that process, we'll have a better understanding.
Yes, I was aware of that, Sam, thank you. Councillor Shanker, when's that soft marketing testing going to be finished? It's overdue already, I believe.
I was hoping it was never started, but that's a different story. You've obviously tried your best to commit this council to restarting the incinerator and getting it running. I've made my position very clear, publicly, privately in these cabinet meetings, which were held in secret. I don't think this plan should ever run. I don't think the city's waste strategy should be based around this plan. But you committed this council to that procurement exercise. I await, as many others do, for that procurement exercise to be completed. And when it's completed, reports will come back to cabinet, and they'll be shared. They'll be shared with in the usual way cabinet reports are shared. But let's be absolutely clear, Councillor Poulter. Had you not made that decision in February?
Can I be absolutely clear, Councillor Shanker, with you?
Of procurement to rerun the incinerator, we wouldn't be in this situation now.
The question was, where are we with the procurement exercise, and why is it behind?
I think the officer quite clearly has told you the lists, that the proposals in the budget are to deliver a balanced budget for the financial year 24-25. There's no changes in the budget which will result in a cost or a saving in relation to the incinerator.
Do you not know the answer to the question, or do you not want to answer it?
I think I've answered the question, Councillor Poulter. If you don't understand it, that's your concern, not mine.
If you did, Councillor Shanker, I missed it. Just a straight question. Where are we with the procurement process, and why is it running late?
As soon as the procurement process is complete, reports will come out.
Right. Why is it running late then?
Councillor Poulter, I'm not sure which bit you don't understand. Who's saying it's running late?
It was projected to be dealt with by now and moving on to the next.
Projected? Was it ever confirmed it'd be dealt with? I've never seen
Let me put it like
I've
this.
never seen a plan
Let me
to
put
say
it like
when
this.
it would be completed.
I'm chairing this meeting,
I asked
Councillor
you
Shank.
about a plan for the procurement exercise, and you told me you didn't have one.
Let me put it to you like this. The current policy of Derby City Council is to agree and sign IAA 3 and move on with the procurement of the incinerator at Sinfin. That's not changed. That was decided in February this year. You've not brought anything to this council that changes that. Why are we not making the relevant progress?
I can gladly confirm IAA 3 hasn't been signed. Lots of work is ongoing to move this sad situation, this very
thank you for confirming
debilitating
that.
project for the council's finances.
When is it likely that you will change the policy then of this city council?
We will do whatever we can to implement this administration's manifesto. I'm not going to, in this public meeting, share with you a number of details and the sensitivities around that. My public position on this is pretty clear, and that's out there in the public domain. You committed this council.
Yes, I did, and the council's, and that's still the council's policy, Councillor Shank.
And you're not the leader of the council.
So when are you going to sign IAA 3?
I think you need to just wake up and realise you know.
When are you going to sign IAA 3?
I'm not signing IAA 3.
Well,
you would have signed IAA 3. It's an officer signature that goes on IAA 3.
Moving on, Councillor Dinser, did you want to come in? You indicated.
I just wanted to, I didn't want to interfere with your
private grief,
with your conversation, but I just want to come back to Councillor Mulhall about efficiencies. I mean, I think technology efficiency we need to continue to be working towards us, and one of the ones which is being implemented is around bin sensors. You may or not be aware of, which was started before our administration, but the sort of the benefits of that hopefully we'll be seeing, particularly in the areas of the city where we have further to go and possibly less bins to empty, and that's a lot of wastage of resources and workforce resources. So bin sensors have been put on all our outer areas so that the travelling time, which is costly, can be reduced, and the bin sensors help us to go only when the bins are full. So that's one of the efficiencies, and so and hopefully we can begin those to other parts of the city where there's more frequent and higher volume of litter and produce, particularly in the inner city. So those are the sort of things that I will be looking at to see how successful they are, and then how in the future we can look at more technology to help some of our more operational frontline services.
Okay, thank you. Being as Councillor Shanker doesn't want to answer the questions, can I ask the officer that's dealing with the relevant issues around the incinerator? And I'll explain the reason for asking. Because the maintenance of the incinerator in its current form is an expense to the council. If, as I believe, the procurement process is behind in its progress, then obviously the costs to the council are extended and increasing. And on top of that, then am I right in thinking that the policy of Derby City Council is to explore an agreement with the County Council, agree it and sign IAA 3 to help the progress of this policy?
I'm happy to answer that question, Chair. So in terms of the project timetable for the energy from waste plant, there has been a delay. There's been a delay in the soft market testing and developing a procurement framework. for the project. However, the business case does contain the ability to delay the project by up to 2 years. So we are still within a reasonable time frame of being able to deliver based on the original business case. We're nowhere near a 2-year point. It is a short delay. And in terms of signing the IAA 3, whilst there is work ongoing to agree the IAA 3, we have, as part of the project, we've got until October 24 to sign that document. So again, we are managing to stay within the project time frame. I'm happy to update you privately, Chair, if you'd like an update on the project outside of this meeting.
Thank you, Sam. That was the type of answer I was looking for, in that I was right in the fact that there have been delays. Sam, do you know roughly the cost to the council on a monthly basis of the maintenance of the plant as it is at the moment?
I don't have that information with me, Chair, but I can provide it after the meeting. Not exactly, Chair. Just in terms of the project time frame, there are various stages within the soft market testing, the procurement, and then the rectification and operation. And we have managed to align so we achieve the same outcome at the same time as planned. We've just had to reschedule some bits within the project to do that.
Okay, you seem a little bit at odds with the leader of the council and the administration in terms of whether this IIA 3 is ever going to be signed. If, as we hear, there's no intention to sign it, why are you still working towards signing it before October?
October's the deadline that we have for signing it, Chair.
Okay, we'll leave it then. I think I probably will have a briefing with you.
Chair, can I just ask you a question, please? The cabinet
this
report was February. You lost control in May. Can you explain why you didn't sign it between February and May? Just a simple question. It's up to you to answer, if not.
Councillor, yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions really on waste collection. We've got the 141k figure in as a pressure for the changes at Rainsway HWRC on Sundays. It's only down as a pressure for 1 year. Is it the case that this figure will be swallowed up in other budgets during subsequent years, as surely it doesn't just become free in years 2 and 3?
Anybody want to take that one?
I can answer that. Same answer as earlier on, Councillor Ayres. You just need to get a grip with these papers. Once the cost is in there in year 1, it stays in there for subsequent years. You don't spend it again. It's in there. It's in the base budget. Simple answer.
Anybody want to answer it properly? Sam?
Councillor Shanker is correct. What we wouldn't do was put that figure in again in the budget proposals, because it would effectively it would double it, take it twice. So the saving is a permanent, the pressure's a permanent pressure put in the budget.
Thank you, Chair. You seem very shaken, Councillor Shanker. I wonder if an October deadline and a November election's got you a bit shook up there. I'd expected to see a budget pressure in this document for the 2 weeks of free bulky waste collection. Where's that particular one in the document?
Happy to answer that, Chair. We discussed this at length in scrutiny in December, Councillor Ayres. So I think what I explained then was that we did some modelling based on feedback from other councils, and we have contained that change within the bulky waste budget.
Wonderful, thanks, Sam. The rest of my questions that I've got on this particular section coming under Councillor Dinser all relate to localities, but I don't think that bit was covered really in Councillor Dinser's contribution to the meeting, nor officers' contribution. So I don't know if anybody wants to make any statements on that before I ask my particular questions on localities.
I think, Councillor, you're probably thinking about public protection officers and neighbourhood funding and the new localities arrangements. You want to
I'm happy to cover that then, Chair. So the savings in Appendix 1, you'll see on page 23 there are existing savings, and as we go on to page 24 there are new savings. So just to be ever so clear, the saving of 280k attributed to community safety, local area coordination, remodelling the team and reduced expenditure within the service is an existing saving that has stayed in the budget proposals. In order to contain this existing saving, we are holding some vacancies at the moment, but we are also doing some detailed work just to understand the impact that the locality working can have in other areas in terms of being an invest to save approach. So the aim of locality working is to help people live their lives with resilience, in balance and reduce demand pressures on other services. The 280k saving in the last round of budget settings looked at restructuring the team. So we will be looking at the team, we'll be carrying out a full review over the course of this year. And as I've said, we are holding some vacancies to enable us some flexibility to do that. But actually what we need to do is look at locality working in its broader sense and understand the impact locality working has on communities and on reduced service demand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So there's the £280,000 there that was just discussed. There's also on page 30 the partial removal of pressure to reinstate neighbourhoods officers, £109,000 there. Can that be explained as well?
Yes, Chair. So that was a temporary reinstatement under the last budget setting process.
Okay, so is the total figure coming out of localities, communities and public safety for this time round then? Would it just be that 280, or does the total that will be gone within this year amount to higher than that with that 109 factored in?
It would be the 280.
Okay, thank you, Sam. How many vacant posts at the minute are not being filled?
I can answer that question as well, Chair. That's 3.
Okay, thank you. So we've got the £280,000 figure then. How many FTEs are expected to be lost from the localities team in order to cover that £280,000 figure?
At this stage, Chair, we've not done the work to look at the structure of the localities team. We are carrying out that review throughout the coming months.
It says 2 on the document paper. Is that 2 not correct then?
It would, so looking at the document, so it would be 4 in total, which would be the worst case scenario for us. If we can make the saving another way, then that's what we'd be looking at doing.
Okay, so what other potential ways would there be to reduce expenditure in that team except for loss of FTEs?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. Well, we're looking at increasing funding wherever we can, so through things like health partnerships or Section 106 grants, for example. We are exploring every opportunity.
That sort of answers the question, but sort of doesn't. There's a very, very high figure attached to this, and I hope there's a determination not to lose FTEs on this. But the idea that we're looking at things and we're trying to find a way forward when we're talking about a very, very important section of the council doesn't really suffice as an answer for me. What other things could we look at on this?
I've just explained that, Councillor Eyre. So increasing income to the service would enable us to maintain the level of expenditure.
Okay, Councillor Dinser. So, all in all, what does this mean for the manifesto pledge to increase the number of public protection officers and to maintain the level of neighbourhood funding? Did you want to give him the answer, or did you want to answer it for him? No, I'm asking Councillor Dinser, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pledge is there. We will work towards our term to reverse the cuts that were made by your administration. 20 public protection officers down to, I believe, 10, a 50% reduction. A reduction which actually means that the people of Derby are not getting the service they deserve. And you made those cuts, Councillor Eyre, sitting here talking about what cuts we're going to be making. The 10% reduction in public protection officers was a massive negative decision by your administration, and we will do whatever it takes to reverse that trend, but we will do it in a responsible manner, and because the budget situation of this council and every local authority across the country is dire, and that budget situation dire because the national government have starved funding from local authorities. This manifesto pledge is over medium term, so it doesn't have to be delivered in this particular year, but we will be working tirelessly to look to see how we can reverse the negative decisions made by your administration in terms of our community, neighbourhood services and facilities.
I was just going to say, Chair, sorry to interrupt the Barney. When you stood up, we couldn't hear you because you had your mic off. So can you put your mic on for us so we can hear? Thank you.
It's on now, thank you. I'm just going to turn it off and ask if there's any other questions.
Thank you, Chair. That's the first time I've ever heard a Cabinet member say we're going to alter the course, we're going to change reductions in the team by implementing more reductions in the team. I've never heard that in this chamber before. I'm baffled that I'm hearing it now. But in that case, I'm not going to ask officers this question. I'll ask it to Councillor Dinser. Your new administration are on record of being critical of anyone being removed from the localities team. 100% cast iron guarantee. Is anybody, more than these four, going to be removed from this team? Yes or no?
Councillor Eyre, you do talk some stuff, you do. There is no way I'm going to stand here to make any comments about how we're going to try to manage some of what historically the worst situation for local authorities, not only in this city, but
it's your budget, Councillor Dinser. It's your portfolio. It's your commitment. Yes or no?
The financial mess that you left behind for us to deal with. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hard, but we will be doing our level best, as we have done with the recycling and the free bulky waste collection pledges. We will continue to look at innovative ways, but responsible budgetary ways to deliver our pledges.
Okay, thank you. I think that's the longest yes or no I've ever heard, but thank you for that. Right, moving on. Any other questions in relation to street pride and communities? No, we'll have all the portfolios to go through those, so thank you, Sam. Who's next? Yes, Mr Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. Paul Simpson, I'm the Chief Exec of the City Council. I'll start, Chair, if I may, because I think it's important, because I have spoken about this before, and obviously the report sets out, everybody knows the challenges facing the local government sector, and the report gives some examples, and I think that context is quite important in terms of some of the things I'm going to allude to in terms of presenting the Chief Exec's budget proposals. But just today, we've seen Grant Thornton, who are one of the major players in the local government audit sector. They're responsible for the audit of a lot of local authorities in terms of the external audit. have released some information which basically sets out that they are now warning that 1 in 5 local authorities are on what they describe, these are their words, not mine, on the brink of financial failure. And last year it was 1 in 6. So the situation is becoming more problematic, and their definition of what they describe as financial failure is an authority having cash reserves at 5% or less than their total revenue expenditure. So the situation is increasingly challenging, and the reason I'm saying that is because I think it's important that we all, in the context of a conversation about the City Council's budget, it's important to remind ourselves that this isn't just a situation facing Derby City Council, but a situation facing the local government sector per se, of every political persuasion. So I'm not obviously going to sit here and point the finger at any particular political party. It's a situation facing local government per se, and I think it's important that we all understand that. So, in terms of moving on then to the Chief Exec's department, I'm sure most members here will be aware that the services that report now directly into myself as the Chief Exec are largely those that previously reported into the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources. And whilst those services, obviously, in the eyes of the public, certainly aren't the kind of important services that councillors have discussed in relation to people and place earlier, they are what I would describe as the enabling services, and they are really, really important. And the reason I've kind of started by talking about the financial situation, it's largely, I say that for 2 reasons. One, because it is a really difficult situation. But secondly, and perhaps less obvious, is the so-called failures, and as I say, that's other people's words, not necessarily mine, of authorities to date, for those authorities that have issued a Section 114 report to date. If you actually look underneath the reasons for that, yes, the financial challenge facing local authorities is a clear and present danger, but there's also an important point about what has been described as a failure in governance. And again, examples in authorities of every political persuasion. And why is that important? Well, it's important because the people responsible for corporate governance largely sit within my portfolio of responsibility. So that's myself as Head of Paid Service, Alison as our Section 151 officer, and Emily as our monitoring officer. So my services are those services that are there to keep this organisation safe. They are there to provide the services in terms of finance, legal, HR, IT, performance, procurement, property, civic and member services, and many more. And as I say, whilst they are enabling services, they aren't seen as you know, the things that people associate with what a local authority does. They are really, really important in terms of keeping the organisation safe. And certainly that kind of triumvirate of the Chief Exec, the Monitoring Officer and the 151 Officer has been mentioned many times by some of the reviews that have been undertaken in terms of those authorities where failure has sadly occurred. So I think it's really, really important that those services are maintained, and clearly, for very obvious and understandable reasons, there have been significant reductions in those services in recent years. And so I'm highlighting it simply to point out that it's really, really important that to keep this organisation safe, we maintain those services as best we can. In terms then, I'm not going to, obviously, as others, Chair, going to go through the savings in any detail. Obviously, very happy for myself and my team to take any questions that members may have. I think I would just point out, though, that a lot of the savings that are scheduled for 24-25 were already in the medium-term financial strategy, i.e. savings that had largely been identified in the previous budget that were going to occur, a programme of ongoing savings for the reasons that I've just set out. So largely the savings are from prior years. There are obviously additional savings that we've identified, and if I can say probably the most eye-catching of those, if that's the right phrase, One is to encourage our partners to make greater use of this building. It's a fantastic facility, and as I'm sure many colleagues and members are aware, we've already agreed for the management team and staff within the Integrated Care Board to move to the Council House, and we're hoping to have that in place by April of this year, and we're working very closely with Chris and his team, and I think that's a really positive step for the council, not just in terms of it generates us a revenue stream, but actually, just as importantly, it will strengthen the partnership arrangements that we've got. We've obviously heard Andy and his team talk about the significance of the relationship with the NHS, so that will certainly help strengthen those arrangements, and we're also talking to other parts of the NHS who are potentially looking at making a similar move to the Council House. And then the other major saving is obviously in relation to artificial intelligence, and you, Chair, alluded to it at the start of the meeting in relation to council tax and debt recovery, and certainly we're looking at making use of that technology to enable us to recover those debts more effectively. So that's all I intend to say, Chair. Very happy to take any questions.
Councillor Mulhall's very keen, but I'm going to have to wait because I've got a quick one first. And then Councillor Wright. Mr Simpson, you touched on reserves and the level of reserves. Over recent years, there's been a lot of comment about the level of reserves within the council, and the council's been suffering pressures over many years that have resulted in a reduction in reserves. Am I right in thinking that the current level of reserves is around the minimum level of capital reserves that are, or levels that are required or are safe? Get that one out of the way first. Is that right, Alison?
I think as we stand currently, yes, but what we are facing this financial year is a significant overspend, which would reduce those reserves to below where we're comfortable. I think our forecast is they will probably reduce to around about 2.5% in terms of our budget risk and general fund reserve, which is less than our desired levels, which are between 3 and 5.
So it's our budget risk reserve that's going down to 0? Councillor Schenker, you've made quite a few points in relation to reserves over the last few years, and now you're proposing to take the budget risk reserve down to 0.
Thank you, Chair. I assume you're going to let me respond like other Cabinet members did after the officers have spoken?
Stick to the point, yes.
Okay. So,
bear in mind this is my meeting, not yours, and
it's a meeting of the Exec Scrutiny Board rather than just your meeting, I would suggest, but that's your call. Can I just start by thanking, there's 20 or so senior officers of this council sat across there. Can I start by thanking each and every one of those, plus the tens, probably hundreds of officers reporting in them who have worked tirelessly on these budget proposals and set a budget which balances for 24-25.
Reserves, Councillor Schenker?
I'll get on to reserves.
Can you do it now, please?
I can do it now if you don't want to listen to...
No, I don't. I want to hear your view on reserves.
It's pretty sad. I'll give you my position on reserves, Councillor Poulter. And if you read the budget papers, there's a contribution to reserves of just over £4 million. £4,187,000 to be exact, because that's the responsible thing to do, to rebuild our reserves. What's historically happened...
Why do you take it out in the first place?
What's historically happened, let me get to that, Councillor Poulter. So when you lost control of the council earlier this year, Councillor Poulter, we did a thorough review of the council's finances. The Q1 outturn report, which I'm sure you've read, and then the Q2 outturn report, again, which I'm sure you read. The inherited position from your administration, Councillor Poulter, was around £6 million overspent for
with a safe level of reserve.
6 million. No, it's not with a safe level of reserve. Where do you think overspends go?
You've just heard that.
Alison's just told you it's that overspend that takes the money out of the reserve. you do really need a couple of lessons in the council's finances. And I wonder if Councillor Holmes refused your offer to take on the job last year, which resulted in you removing him from the cabinet. So you need to listen to me. The budget risk reserve goes to zero only
because you're allowing it
if
to do so.
your overspend, the overspend that we inherited, if that stays at the levels it is, the budget risk reserve goes to zero. We're proposing to put money into the budget risk reserve. I hope that helps you, Councillor Poulter.
Thank you very much. I've got a quick question for Paul. It's to do with the data that's on page 33 at the top, just underneath Appendix 1. It says, unachieved historic saving 22-23. I'm keen, to understand what is specifically that historic saving that we're now claiming. Sorry, it's page 33 at the very top of it. I can pop down and show you, Paul. Yeah. It's the unachieved historic saving of 22-23, and I'm just keen to understand what is that saving specifically and why are we claiming it now? It's clearly a really good saving.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I've got different page numbers on reports. It's a saving, as it says in the text, from the year 22-23. We did a sort of root and branch look through all the savings and the unachieved savings, and there was this one that had got no delivery plan against. So it had got unidentified actions to deliver that saving. So it was only prudent that because we'd not got a course of action to deliver that we actually reinstated and reversed that saving as part of the budget for next year.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Mulhall?
I'm not sure. Give me 30 seconds to have a think.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Wright then while you're thinking.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wright, Arboretum Ward. Thank you, Paul, for giving us a sense of the structural problems that all councils are suffering from with respects to budgets and funding, largely driven by the government of the day, one would say. I'm a new councillor to this chamber. I understand that in 2018 we had 36 million reserve for Derby City Council. That's what I understand. I haven't actually seen the figure, but this is what I've been told. Well, what's happened to it? Thank you.
That's quite a complicated question, actually. But in
as I said, Chair, I'm new to the...
I appreciate that. We've still got quite a lot to get through to, but a general analysis of how it is that we've needed to spend those reserves over those last few years? No, you can't, because you weren't involved. And this is not your meeting.
We have seen, as lots of councils have seen, big spikes in spend within social care, and it has been primarily in relation to overspends that have mainly meant that we've had to draw on the reserves.
I think, Councillor Wright, in my conclusion of it would be that this year's pressures are a continuation of the pressures that the council and many other councils have suffered in the last few years, and as a result, reserves across the board, not just this council, but many councils have suffered to be able to manage and produce a balanced budget. I think that's the summary of it. Councillor Bolton.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the officers for their reports. Clearly, this is a sad day, or will be a sad day for Derby and the residents that we all here represent, with the possible reduction of services. But I was particularly listening to the Chief Executive when he mentioned that there are many local authorities on the brink of financial failure of every political persuasion, but predominantly the Conservative councils. But my question to Paul, or perhaps Alison, is how much has our central government grant funding been reduced over the last 13 years?
I don't have the total figures.
Yeah, if I may, Chair. I mean, obviously we can provide, we don't have that detail to hand, but I think broadly speaking, if I was to say that, rather than necessarily specifically for Derby, the reduction in central government grant to local government has been in the region of about 60%. I think, and don't quote me on this, I think it's in the ballpark of about 50 odd million for Derby, maybe more than that, but we'll clarify that, Chair. And if I may, Chair, just to pick up on the question that Councillor Mulhall asked about savings to Sam, and the kind of level of confidence about the degree of savings that we deliver. Just to say, at Q2, we'd achieved 94% of the savings for the current financial year, and at Q3 that had risen to 96%. Thank you.
Do you have anything to come back, having had 30 seconds more to think about it?
No, I think all I have to say is obviously, Paul, if you've got 96% achieved, then obviously that's quite encouraging. Good.
Can I just follow up on Councillor Bolton's question and pose another question you're not going to have the answer to, but would you be able to provide the level and the amount of grant funding that the council's received over the same period?
Yes, we can do. Yeah, we can have a look at that.
And that's not an insignificant figure either, is it? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Sakib, I'm in Councillor for Blakely's ward. I think Paul answered my question about the savings. You say 96% has been saved from last year's budget, is it, Paul? It is. Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? I've just got a couple for Paul. You've recently made some significant savings in terms of the cost of senior management, most of which have gone through. We've subsequently lost a strategic director. Can I confirm that your intention is to replace that role, or to recruit to that role? And the reason I'm asking is, we're running at a level of strategic director level that was greater than before, but in my view is towards a minimum. And I wanted just reassurance that you intend to replace and recruit to that role.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really well-timed question. Just last week, I informed my team that I do intend to recruit to that post, ideally from existing members of staff. I've informed the team that any interested candidates come back to me with information as to how they meet the person specification of that role by this close of play this Friday. There will then be a short recruitment process, not a full recruitment process, given that it's an internal promotion rather than an external advert, which will evidently be at strategic director level a member appointment. I'm in the process of assembling a member panel that will be chaired by the leader. Obviously, I've invited your leader to participate in that chair, and Alex is supporting me in recruiting. It has to be at least 3 members, including a cabinet member. So we're in the process of doing that. I'm hoping, Chair, to conclude that process by the end of this month.
Thank you. That's reassuring. The other one that you mentioned in your introduction was around property services and the inclusion of other partner working within the council house. I think it's fair to say that that's slower than was originally predicted. It was in last year's budget and in this year's as well. Maybe, Emily, could you give us an overall summary of your position in relation to property services, not just within the council house, but generally? I don't think I've been made aware of significant income from disposal of council properties, which was anticipated.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you'll be aware, a report was brought to Cabinet in July 2023, seeking approval to rent to external partners up to 200 desks within the council house. As you're also aware, we've already secured tenants for 30 of those desks, being the NHS Team Up, who are already in occupation. And as Paul mentioned, we have agreement in principle with the ICB for a further 70 desks starting from the 1st of April, and with further discussions in progress to reach up to the 200-seat target. There was no specific timescale set out in that cabinet report. There had been a historic target in relation to council house income that had been within the MTFP, but the report in summer 2023 brought forward concrete proposals for realising targets and income in relation to the council house. In relation to other aspects, in relation to property rationalisation, work is ongoing in relation to the business as usual disposal of assets. Recent disposal activity is ongoing in relation to the Rycote Centre, for example, which we have completed the disposal of that, and ongoing activity continues, and the council has a asset rationalisation programme board which meets to review proposals for disposal of assets throughout the year.
Okay, thank you. Are we meeting targets that we set ourselves in relation to property rationalisation?
There hasn't been a target set for capital assets to be disposed of, and that doesn't exist. What we do is review our assets on a regular basis against criteria, including are those assets surplus, are they vacant, are they surplus, have they been declared surplus, do they no longer have a business requirement for the council, are they, for example, income generating, or are they assets which are held within general fund, for example, which would make them more appropriate for disposal. So those criteria are applied to our assets on a regular basis, but there is no target specifically associated with capital disposals.
As potential for significant income, do we need targets to be able to make sure that we are keeping on top of the disposal programme?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think we require a target, because obviously any decision to dispose of an asset is determined according to needs and requirements of the service at any given time, And what we do is have a corporate responsibility to keep reviewing those assets and disposing of them as and when they become surplus. And that is what we do organisationally.
So without targets, how do we drive it?
By the accountability of the Director and the Corporate Property Rationalisation Board.
Okay. Alistry Park, Paul?
Alistry Hall is currently being a way forward is currently being considered by the council in conjunction with key partners, including the Derbyshire Wildlife Trust and other partners who are looking at options for Alistry Hall, both in terms of retaining it on whilst potential funding options are considered, but also in terms of whether the most appropriate action would be its disposal. Those discussions are ongoing.
Sounds like we could do with driving things a little in some respects. Councillor Khan, you indicated.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. As you well know, your administration didn't set any targets, so in 7 months, nothing has changed much. The way you were asking these questions is like you've been in opposition for 7 years rather than 7 months. Property rationalisation is going on. I am in weekly contact with officers to try to bring everything in line, but unfortunately, due to some of the cuts you made, we don't have enough officers to concentrate on this and this alone. So I am talking to Emily and Karen and everybody regarding this. I can assure the people of Derby, not just yourself, that I want to bring in properties that are underused or empty, not just for capital revenue, but so that we can put it to use and get rid of some of the things that you talked about earlier, homelessness and people in temporary accommodation. So it is my intention and is, I think, the Cabinet's intention to get these into use as soon as possible. But unfortunately, due to your cuts, we don't have enough officers to carry this out in expediency that you seem to generate now when you're sitting as a chair, but didn't have when you was leader of the council.
Unfortunately, Councillor Khan, it seems that after 7 months in charge of this portfolio, you've done nothing. So you're going to be challenged.
You didn't do anything in 6 years, so give me a chance.
You're going to be challenged, aren't you?
You didn't do anything in 6 years, so give me a chance. I've only been here 7.
That means we've concluded with the Chief Exec's report, I believe. Unless...
Sorry, I've had my hand up quite a few times, Chair, just on Paul's report. If I could just make a note. Alison, you talked about potentially the increase in grant funding, and Paul, you talked about the decrease in centralised continuation of funding. Now, we all know that grant funding, and we'll all be aware in this room, is not a replacement for funding to be able to deliver services and plan to deliver services effectively. My experience is that grant funding is literally a year's one-off funding with no revenue costs, and those revenue costs are expected to be picked up by the local authority. So even though there might be an increase in grant funding, there is still a deficit overall. Thank you.
So you could decline the grant funding if you don't want it, and the pressure on revenue.
We'd have no way of surviving without it.
Okay, thank you for that question via Councillor Shank.
Would you like a little bit more commentary on Alistry Hall as you specifically picked that one out? Sure, okay. You probably know about it from your mate.